This is WKDU 91.7 FM, Drexel University's award-winning, student-run, free-format, commercial-free radio. Good morning and welcome to 1.6 degrees centigrade, rising, and your critical role in climate change on all matters impacted by climate change. I'm your author and host, Diane Davis, and this morning we have a very exciting guest, and we'll be talking to the Honorable Greg Vitali, member of the House of Representatives in the Pennsylvania Legislature, in a very exciting interview involving the Marcellus Shale region. The Pennsylvania State Legislature and issues such as lobbying and legislature that has been put before the Senate and they've neglected to vote on it. The representatives and mitigation strategies of greenhouse gases. Representative Greg Vitali has been reelected to 12 terms to the House of the State of Pennsylvania Legislature, representing the 166th Legislative District of Pennsylvania. Representative Vitali has several offices, one in Harrisburg and one in Havertown, PA.
Well, thank you, Diane. I appreciate that. And it's an honor to be here, and thank you for all the great work that you are doing, and thank you for giving me opportunity to talk. Yeah, my district, the 166th district that you mentioned, it includes most of Haverford Township, about half of Radnor Township, and a little bit of Lower Merion Township. And I've been serving, as you mentioned, since 1992. Now, my mission in the legislature and in life is environmental protection. They say, most politicians' information is a mile wide and an inch deep. Well, I've tried to do the opposite. I've just tried to focus on the environment because it is a very technical area. I've tried to just learn it well enough so that I can be proactive in that area. And I view my duty when I am up there, that is my watch. I keep an eye on environmental bills and regulations and try to spot troublesome things and then react to them. I've been on the House, I was on the House Environmental Committee for 24 years. The last 4 have been as chairman until I was removed for conduct on becoming a legislator.
I was just going to ask you why you're no longer on this committee.
Yeah, well, you know what? I should be chairman. And the reason I am not chairman, I guess I just sort of tend to annoy powerful people. I tend to speak my mind. And I think the event that really triggered my being shifted off that committee occurred about a year ago. January 3rd, the House, as it starts each term, passes new rules. And sort of at the last minute, sort of under the radar, they tried to change the rules to reduce the amount of time the public would get to view new bills and reduce the amount of time that the legislature would be able to debate bills. And I had a real problem with that because we had worked on those reforms it took a lot to get these transparency rules in place. So, but I was told by my leadership, it's okay, we've worked out a deal, and I said, no, that's not right. And I got out on the House floor swearing in day with all the flowers and the guests and all the rest, and I just did my best to just oppose those rules because I know what happens. I know what bad things to the environment can happen when you can sneak things in. And 2 days later, I was told I was no longer chairman of the environmental committee. And that's just when you annoy powerful people, that's it's the price you pay. And that's why, in my view, other people might have a different view of this, but that's how I view why I'm no longer but I continue, even though I'm not chairman, I continue to focus on Pennsylvania environmental policy generally, but specifically climate and energy, trying to promote renewable energy, trying to promote energy conservation, increasing awareness with regard to climate change. And one thing I've learned, I'll just say this out just to get it out there, when you do environmental policy in a fossil fuel state, and Pennsylvania is a huge fossil fuel state with oil, gas, coal. You're playing defense because you're playing defense. You're trying to stop bad things. You're trying to make bad things less bad, as opposed to really, promoting good things. Regrettably, so my role up there has been to kind of try to stop bad things. So that's kind of what I do.
Well, I know you're fighting an uphill battle because I spoke to a lady up in Germantown who had been with us at the Mercantile Building, the environmental meeting.
That was a good
and
presentation.
She told me that there has been this plan where the oil companies just took the map of the county up there and just divided it up among themselves, and that 100% of the county is scheduled to be drilled by hydrofracturing, drilling. And she said that there would not be a school or a hospital where, this sludge, this radioactive sludge that's coming up from the broken up shale, along with the pools of gas and oil, would be exposed to this 24/7, because once you bring it up, it's at the grade level, and then it gets into the water, it gets into the airstream. So when she told me that, I didn't know that it had progressed that far, as a matter of fact. And she's going to be coming down to talk with us on a segment in a couple of weeks. So she's going to be coming down to be recorded. And we're going to bring up this issue. And she is not at liberty to show the maps, but because it came through the grapevine, so to speak. And but she is going to show very pertinent scientific photographs. The other thing she brought up was, many people probably know this, hunting is a big sport in Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth, all over, and especially up in the Northeast.
Yeah, we closed down the legislature during hunting season. They closed the schools. It's wild,
Okay,
really.
You see what I mean?
It's a very big deal, yeah.
But here's the thing. The deer are getting into these sludge pits with the radioactive materials and the oil and the gas that's being separated from this production water. And the production water has all of these chemicals in it to begin with that are toxic. So you have a combination of radioactive metallic elements that have been brought up from, being in the ground, billions of years. And then you put it in these sludge pits, and they put a plastic liner down where you might, just as well forget, it's worthless. And there's no legislation, by the way, to demand that they build a reinforced concrete pool before they put the sludge in there. So it gets into the ground, which violates the toxic soil law of 2016. That, as it's coming through the soil on its way down, it then meets our underwater aquifers, or the below crust aquifers, and the other, like streams and rivers, etc. So, I mean, once they bring this stuff up, everybody's going to be radiated. And this has been going on since 2013, I understand, in the state, big time.
Yeah, well, I would say this. One of the big problems with regard to Pennsylvania and the environment is the Department of Environmental Protection is hugely understaffed. Since about 2006, we've lost maybe 700 staffers. We've lost maybe $50 million in state funding. And this is intentional. I mean, we have a very conservative legislature.
Yeah.
So this is an intentional effort on the part of conservatives in Harrisburg. So when I go around and visit drilling sites and compressor stations and other important areas and talk with DEP personnel, I mean, the anecdotal evidence is they are just grossly understaffed. So one problem is just not enough boots on the ground to enforce the existing laws and regulations relating to drilling. And then the second piece of that is trying to get decent laws and regulations related to drilling. For example, and I mentioned this in the Marcellus Money Report, as it relates to conventional drilling as opposed to unconventional drilling, we had a set of conventional drilling regulations that were 5 years in the making, that the Independent Regulatory Review Commission found were in the public interest, that received overwhelming public support. And the legislature passed legislation canceling these regs. And it's only because of, the conservative nature of the legislature and the enormous amount of money, lobbying expenses, campaign contributions that the drilling industry gives. And it's not just the Republicans. I wish I could say it was just the Republicans. I'm a Democrat.
It's both.
If you get into the southwestern part of Pennsylvania, you have Democratic state reps who are closely aligned with coal and gas, and you can't get a vote out of them for renewable energy or climate change or anything like that. So it's
they force people to buy this stuff.
So it's difficult to get good regulations, relating to drilling, good laws relating to drilling. And a lot of this goes to what you had just mentioned as far as these basic safety features of just sort of contain, things like that, just sort of things that would make reduce the occurrence of spills and minimize the impact when they happen. So okay.
Let me ask you something. I would like to address a letter to is it the President of the Senate? Who puts the bills before the legislature for voting?
Yeah, like for example, in the House, it's sort of an agreement between the House Speaker, Mike Turzai, and the House Majority Leader, Dave Reed. And in the Senate, certainly President Joseph Scarnati is very instrumental in that. But if I can just make one final point, if I can just go back a little bit, and this again, it's a very important point related to drilling and related to the influence of money. When in the beginning of 2016, Governor Wolf put out his methane reduction strategy.
Oh, he did have one.
He did. He introduced it when John Quigley was the head of the DEP, the secretary of the DEP. And that should have been done by the end of 2016. And that had because people don't realize methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. Much more powerful than CO2, but with a shorter shelf life. And drilling from the point where you do the drilling itself to where that methane reaches the burner tip of your stove or wherever else it is, there's the possibility of leakage. And this unburnt methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. So he put this methane reduction strategy out that dealt with both news sources and existing sources. And that had things like having state-of-the-art equipment that leaked less. It had greater inspections and things like that. And it's because of the influence of this Marcellus money, in my view, and a very conservative legislature who gets their money and feels the brunt of their lobbying, that has continued to stall this methane reduction strategy. So when we're talking about in this report, what are the consequences of all the campaign contributions? What are the consequences of all this lobbying? I mean, there's two right there: canceling the conventional drilling regulations, which affects health and safety, canceling or stalling the methane reduction strategy that deals with the whole climate change problem. And that's not even to mention the severance tax. We're the only major state in the country that produces natural gas that does not have a severance tax. We've probably lost, I'll bet you over $1.5 billion, maybe more in dollars for lack of a severance tax. We desperately need that money. The state is, we're borrowing and relying on gambling, and we're inadequately funding our public schools. We ought to have a severance tax. But one reason we don't have a severance tax is these drillers and the drilling interests and how they, let me give you just an example on the lobbying front. In the past 10 years, we outline this in our Marcellus Money report. And I do want to say this report we built on some really good work by Common Cause of Pennsylvania, PA Conservation Voters. I'm a good friend of Barry Kaufman and Josh McNeil, who were really did the base work. So I don't want to take any credit away from them. They did. Okay. We built on that. But what this report shows is that in the past 10 years, $65 million has been spent lobbying in Harrisburg, $65 million by about 42 drilling companies. And it also found that there are on record, if you look at these lobbying reports, which we did, there's 203 lobbyists registered on these reports working for the drilling companies. 203, and that's there's 203 legislators.
I was just going to ask
so
you that.
We each get our own lobbyists, except I get none, and I'll bet you the big guys get about 10 apiece.
When I heard this
isn't that funny?
At the environmental meeting, I was just astounded. 203 to 203.
Yeah, and we know that, and the reason I did this report was as follows. I would go to environmental committee meetings, and you would look in the back. You look at all the chairs, and you'd see all these well-heeled lobbyists dressed to the nines who were drilling interest lobbyists. So wherever you had a bill relating to that, so they just packed the place, and you can't walk through any congestion point in the Capitol, maybe this, where people flow without seeing these oil industry lobbyists, gas industry lobbyists with, just sitting there waiting, buttonholing people. So their presence, I mean, you knew just at a gut level they were there. And how do you explain this presence of lobbyists to the public? So what we tried to do with this report was we tried to just quantify it. And it's just so we could just say, rather than me saying, yeah, I think there's a lot because I see people around. We said now we can say there's 203, or now we can say $65 million. And again, and if you look on the campaign contribution side, which is probably more important than the lobbying side, I mean, we found that over the past 10 years, that those 42 drilling companies spent over just under $8 million in contributions to the legislature. For example, Senator Scarnati, the president pro tem of the Senate himself, got almost 500, rather almost $500,000 himself, $400,000, and what we found when we looked at these, go ahead, you were going to say something.
There are no restrictions in our
see,
state
that's the
legislature.
problem. See that's and then when we talk about what's needed here in this report, one of the problems is Pennsylvania is one of the few states that does not have any contribution limits. So if you are an individual, you can give me, a $100,000 check. No one actually has, unfortunately, but you could do that if you wanted. There's no contribution limits in Pennsylvania, and that's one of the problems. And so what we saw when we looked at this money, we saw that the people who were getting the money, and the biggest recipients, as I mentioned, President Pro Tem Scarnati, Speaker Turzai, Majority Leader Reid, and the campaign committees in the House, Republican campaign committees in the House and Senate. What we found was that the money goes to those limited entities, by and large, who control the flow of legislation. They're not dumb. I mean, it goes to Republicans, not Dems. But guess what? If the Democrats ran things, it would go to the Dems. Yeah. So they're really, it's just a matter of putting huge sums of money and giving that to the people who control the flow of legislation. So that's the problem, and that's why the public is being cheated. The public is getting less protection. The environment's getting less protection because of, in my view, the influence of the gas industry in Pennsylvania.
I think I had mentioned to you the infomercial that Fox Chase just started at the beginning of the year. 1.7 million new cases of cancer.
Right.
Are probably going to be diagnosed in just this year alone, 2018. Yeah. I mean, we're sitting on a virtual bed of radiation, plus the methane is 23 to 25%, depending on the altitude, more dense than carbon dioxide. We still have the carbon dioxide issue. And the thing that is really pushing up the degrees in centigrade or Fahrenheit of the atmospheric temperature is the methane. Yeah. The methane is pushing it faster and higher than the carbon dioxide, which has always been the issue. But nobody wants to talk. When you hear these people in the legislature, nobody wants to talk about the effects of methane. But methane is our number one problem. Yeah. We have the other a greenhouse gas issue, and the VOC issues, and the pollution issues. But the methane is just getting baked into the troposphere, which is the first 7 to 10 miles above the grade, and it's just getting baked in. We'd have to stop all burning, stop all drilling, in order for it to become reduced at any time.
What people don't realize, I'll just throw this in real quickly, Pennsylvania itself produces a full 1% of the world's greenhouse gases. 1% of the world's greenhouse gases. So environmental activists in Pennsylvania should know that they, if they want to make a change, they're in a very good place to do it. It's huge.
Well, at the end of each one of my segments, I ask people that ask my listening audience that if they have been moved by the information that we've tried to provide, that they will write to their, elected legislators, both at the state level and in Congress.
Elections matter, and I think you saw that with Donald Trump.
Oh yeah.
You see what withdrawing us from the Paris Accords and proposing to slash funding for EPA and trying to roll back the CAFE standards for vehicles and rolling back the Clean Power Plan and then just recently, just almost the other day, all the opening so much more of our shores or of our coastal area to leasing, oil and gas leasing. I mean, elections matter. So people need to, I think, do a little more than write a simple letter. I mean, they really need to pay close attention to their elected officials and how they vote, and let them know when they're doing good, let them know when they're doing bad, and remember it on election day. And even some people need to step forward and run themselves because it's sometimes legislatures play games. I mean, I won't mention names, but there are some legislators who will never give you a good environmental vote when it matters. They're listening to their leadership, other people. If it's ever so they might have built up a good environmental record, but I just watched them play the board up in Harrisburg when we're voting, and if that vote is going to be a deciding vote, they're not voting with the environment. So you kind of have to be savvy in figuring a lot of this stuff out. And people really, and sometimes it is hard to figure out. Give me another pertinent example. Governor Wolf wants a severance tax. The Democrats want to move a severance tax. The current bill before us, I think, would be a disaster for the environment because I just know, based on many public statements I've read, people I've talked to, and 25 years of experience, we're not getting that severance tax unless we give in return provisions that are going to severely weaken and degrade the Department of Environmental Protection's ability to do its job. Right. I'll get into that a little deeper, but the point of the matter is, people just say, well, you're going to vote for that severance tax, right? Or why'd you vote against that? It's a little more complicated. Yeah, that's right now. Although I support the severance tax, if we go back to Harrisburg in late January and move that severance tax bill, we're selling out the environment for political purposes. And so it's kind of, we've lost the ability to regulate the gas industry and protect public health and the environment in exchange for having to, Governor Wolf and other legislators to be able to say politically, yes, I got a severance tax for you, even though it might be a really 0.7% severance tax or some really small thing. So a lot of it is just politics too. Mm-hmm. So you got to kind of be savvy about this too. That's why what I would say to people who want to help, I would say you have to work in unison. And by that, I mean you have to work with groups. I would suggest this, groups like, the Sierra Club of Pennsylvania, Penn Environment, Penn Future, Clean Air Council, Clean Water Action, PA Conservation Voters. Support them with your money, support them with your volunteer work, get on their action alert list. Because, when I interact with, when I try to change things in Harrisburg, I work with those people. And I, so when I say, I call a Matt Stepp or a Joanne Kilgour from Sierra Club or Penn Future, I say, that crappy, drilling bill's on the agenda, tomorrow. We need to kind of get emails into these are the legislators I think who need to hear from you. So, and they will get out these action alerts. And if you're someone out there listening, be on that list, so because this stuff happens really fast. So support those groups with your dollars, get on their action alert lists, and so you can work in unison. That's much better then just if the spirit moves you to feel environmental, just write a good environmental letter at random to your legislator. It has to be focused, coordinated, targeted, strategic.
Well, what do you think about the idea of getting all these groups together and doing a massive petition?
Well, I think these groups, the ones I mentioned, do tend to work in concert. Now, they're not always on the same page on every issue, but they are, for the big issues and when there are a consensus, they do work in concert with each other. So I do think there is this effort to act in a coordinated fashion going on right now, but the reality is, either individually or collectively, they're not strong enough. So they need more strength. They don't have the money of the drilling industry. They don't have the resources of the drilling industry. But if you're out there and you care about the environment, support them. Support these groups and make them stronger so they can be more effective.
Well, one of the things that the new student government president here at Drexel has taken all of the groups like Sierra, Fossil Free Drexel, Defend Our Future, Earth Justice, all of these school groups and organizations, and he wants to make them all work in tandem so that we could get something done in Harrisburg, like a petition or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was looking at that idea and thinking, well, we have all of these groups that are really powerful groups.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get somebody like Caroline Burkholder at Defend Our Future, and pass around. I mean, what does it cost to pass around a petition to everybody who's on the mailing list, the email list?
Well, I think legislators understand one thing. That they understand losing their job. They that's what they fear. I mean, you're not going to do big things unless you can make them realize that if they don't act in a certain way, they might lose their job. So I think that we need to and we need to really challenge them. We need to be strong, and we need to have
big numbers of concerns.
We do, but I think if someone wants a shorthand way of how to help, I mean, that would be one thing. Another thing would be, just if you're of the writing mind and talent, get out there, try to get a guest editorial in the Inquirer about some of these issues that count, or your local paper. Maybe the Inquirer is a little, you can't get in there. Let's try the Delaware County Daily Times or the Bucks County Courier Times or the Norristown Herald or the Westchester Daily Local, but you know what, that's another effective way to do it. Or take the step beyond the letter or the email. Gather a bunch of constituents and take someone who really knows their stuff, and even if it's a non-constituent, and say, listen, we'd like to meet with you, our legislator. We have constituents.
That's what I'm thinking. Make a list of the concerns. And take it to the president pro tem who is responsible for bringing the legislation to the legislature for voting.
Right. So you have these people we talked about who control the flow of legislation. People like Mike Terzai and Majority Leader Dave Reed and President Pro Tem Joseph Scarnati of the Senate. But I think they also listen to individual members. I mean, they don't, and they need the votes to get stuff passed. They need 102 votes. I mean, in the House, we need 102 votes to get. We need a constitutional majority, which is the majority of those elected to serve, as distinguished from those who are present on a given day.
Okay.
So if let's say a suburban Republican legislator says, Majority Leader Reid, I just can't give you the vote on that DEP permitting bill. My constituents are not going to forgive me for that. Then they don't have the vote. So sometimes someone like Michael Terzai, he might be bulletproof as far as the ability of environmentalists to cause him to lose his job, but he's not going to want to expose his members to losing their jobs. So sometimes, it's key to, and some of them come from areas where they're in the thick of drilling country, or they don't care about a petition from environmentally minded people. But
I'm talking about across the state, not just here.
No, I understand. So what I'm saying is, sometimes it's a matter of, not so much changing the mind of Scarnati or Terzai, but rather changing the mind of rank and file legislators. Because at the end of the day, they, in order to keep their job as in leadership, need to get voted every 2 years.
Sure.
And they are voted by members, not constituents. They're voted by, for example, for Mike Terzai to remain as Speaker, he needs essentially the majority of Republican House members to vote for him. So he's not going to. It's not in his political interest to force them to take votes that are going to cause them to lose their jobs. So what I'm saying is, you might be able to get out of Speaker Terzai by getting to some Republican area representatives. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. There is so much. I have to tell you, when I started talking to people about this program, I'd see rolled eyes, the head would go back, and I'd say, oh, thank God somebody's doing, it's about time somebody's doing something, because people feel so disempowered with their government, and they feel so helpless with this all-pervasive, it's not only a Pennsylvania critical issue, it's a world critical issue.
It is.
Because whatever we do here gets into the wind, it goes through the trade winds, the horse winds around the globe, and everybody is affected. What goes up, it comes back down in the snow, the rain, the hail. That's the environmental science of the biosphere, and no one can hide from this. This affects all of us. Well, I see that there were many, many reasons that prompted you to start working on this wonderful report. And I'm going to announce for the audience the name of this report. It's called The Marcellus Money and the Pennsylvania Legislature. And it was written on February 10th, 2017. It's very current and revised.
We keep revising it as new reports come in, and I think if people want to take a look at it, the easiest way to do it is, my name's Greg Vitali, so Google me, and eventually you're going to get on my legislative website, and then on my legislative website you're going to see a little block for Marcellus Money in the Pennsylvania Legislature. Just click on that. So just all you really need to remember is Greg Vitali, and then Google that, and that'll take you to this report.
On my link page, I will put a link there for your web page, and put the name of this document, because it is so impressive, and I know it took a lot of hard work on the part of Bobby.
Bobby Denault was very helpful in helping me put this together. He did a lot of good background work and a lot of time sifting through reports. Had a lot of good suggestions. Did all the graphics and he was very, very helpful with this report.
So we're kind of back at the first base. How do we get the statement of financial interests that the members of the legislature are supposed to fill out properly, and they don't fill it out? They don't put in the gifts.
The problem is not, okay, a couple of questions there, a couple of points there. It's not that they don't fill it out properly. It's that the threshold reporting requirements are too high, so that they don't have to put really the gifts that they get, or the hospitalities, transportation, lobbying they get. The reporting requirements are too high. So those thresholds need to be lower. The second point is to get a copy of these reports. They're all in the public realm, and there's a website that is listed on our Marcellus Money report that will help you get to that report. So this is all in the public realm. You can find the and basically I'm looking at the report now. It's ethicsrulings.state.pa.us ethics, and so if you get on the report, it's about 4 pages into it, and you can look at those ethics statements of financial interest also, and
Okay. I'll put the link on my
Yeah.
link page
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
event that the listeners are not writing down or whatever.
Okay.
And so that'll be two links that they will have as
Yeah.
references.
Yeah.
The reason why you tackled putting this report together came about as a result of your seeing this 203 lobbyists for 203 members of the
Yes,
legislature,
Yeah.
and knowing about these lobbying payments to the members, which you've reiterated here in the report, and how did you go about collating all of this information into the Marcellus Money and the Pennsylvania Legislature report?
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to give, coming back to the beginning, give due credit to Common Cause of Pennsylvania and PA Conservation Voters, because they had been maintaining a database for a number of years, and they frankly just ran out of funding and weren't able to proceed. And it's an issue I've been very active in over the years anyway. And these are the type issues I get involved in. And I just decided I wanted to expand what they were doing, continue what they were doing, maybe take a little different take on what they were doing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, why I did it, honestly, I mean, I got tired of losing. I hate, we fight these battles,
every day,
and you just when they do things like cancel the drilling regulations or just it's just like there's no reason to do this. I mean, you got to take it. So that's the thing, if you put out a report where you're portraying someone like Senator Scarnati in a bad light, I mean, there's consequences. That's why I'm not chairman of the Environmental Committee anymore, for doing stuff like that. When you annoy powerful people. So there are consequences to doing this, and so you've been reluctant over the years to take it that far. But it was like, you just got to do something more than you're doing, because it's just not a good.
You have to start.
This is not a good result. I mean, just tired of losing, honestly. Just tired of. So I did this report out of just sheer frustration about having good environmental policy thwarted year after year.
It's time for Paul Revere's ride again, and we ought to be hitting the Liberty Bell with a sledgehammer, and that's what I'm trying to. I'm trying to get people through information,
right?
Motivated.
Yeah.
If we have to coagulate into one solid mass, all the voters across the street, across the state.
Well, you're hitting a good year. I mean, this is. There's so much reaction to Trump's election, and you have a Democratic base which is highly motivated and a Republican base which is a bit suppressed, and you saw that in November of 2017 and the Alabama election and some other things.
Sure.
It's a 2018 is going to be a good year for progressives in my view. So this is ride the wave. I think this is something we can work with. Going
into this a little further, So you found, you want to expand upon a little bit more what you
Yeah.
found when you started
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
the work that the Pennsylvania Conservancy had done,
Yeah.
but that since they ran
Yeah.
out of money, you had
Yeah.
you felt
Yeah.
that you should pick up on it.
Well, I think, again, just to kind of review, I think in the area of lobbying, we found that $65 million had been spent in the last 10 years in lobbying. We found that there were 203 lobbyists registered working for the drilling industry. We found on the campaign contribution side over the past 10 years that almost $8 million in campaign contributions were given by these 42 entities to the legislature. We found that the leading recipient of these campaign contributions by these 42 entities was Senator Scarnati, but the big recipients were, in addition to Senator Scarnati, Speaker Terzai, Majority Leader Reid, the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, and the House Republican Campaign Committee, and these are the entities who control the flow of legislation. And we also found that with regard to the statements of financial interest, very little gifts, which we know are happening, are reported, and that's because of the low threshold requirements.
May I ask you, with that in mind, how did you arrive at these? How were the figures arrived at? I'm going to read. May I read the first?
Oh, sure, whatever you like. Sure.
This is just for the 10-year period, 2007 to 2017. The recipient, President Pro Tem Joe Scarnati, $483,500. The House Republican Campaign Committee, $300,175. Senate Republican Campaign Committee, $265,100. Speaker Mike Terzai for $241,300. House Majority Leader Dave Reed, as you had mentioned before, $203,250. The Senate Majority Jake Corman, $163,120. Representative Jeff Pyle, $98,663. Representative Jay Costa, $97,150. Senator,
he incidentally is the only Democrat in that group.
So, I mean, it's not a party issue. I mean, it's just human, I guess. Human.
They give the money to the people who can help their political agenda.
Exactly. Okay. And Senator Governor candidate Jack Wagner was $89,960. I mean, these are phenomenal amounts of money. I mean, a lot of people don't make that in, in the 10-year period.
Well, they have a lot of, but when you think about how much money those 42 drilling entities have saved by not having to pay a severance tax,
Sure.
Well over $1.5 billion, it's just good business sense, you just pay a little bit in campaign contributions, save a lot in taxes, so, but the loser, obviously, is we the public, who have to use our sales tax and income tax and taxes we pay to fund government, to fund stuff like education and transportation and other things. So they're it's a good investment from the drillers' part. They spend a little bit of money and to save a lot of money, and the public ends up holding the bag.
Well, we have to do something. We've got to get motivated. We've got to put it on wheels, because the health of everybody is, and we're talking about embryos in the womb who have not even been born yet. The PCBs, the CFCs, they get into the mother's bloodstream. They're transferred by the umbilical cord into the embryo. We've got learning disabilities. We've got ADA, ADHA, we've got infertility problems, like I said, new cancer cases, all kinds of public health risks, and the quality of life that I think the original forefathers of our country, when they put together the Constitution, I got the impression that they wanted the electorate to be able to go forward with whatever they wanted to do in life, reasonably assured of a good environment around them. But now we're getting to the point where there's so much disease and so many allergies and early deaths that people's lives are interrupted. We're not getting the full potential out of people who have trained for years to do professional jobs, scientific jobs, all kinds of losses to the electorate. So what's the result of all this that we can take away? The report, all the figures that are in here. If we were to write a letter with a huge petition, I'm talking about a huge petition, across the state, all the counties, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, if we could get a petition that had, several million, maybe a majority of the voters, and take it to Harrisburg, what do you think would happen?
I think you need to focus in on elections. I think you need to put the fear of elected officials that if they don't vote pro-environment, it's going to hurt them. I think I'm not sure petition is the right. Don't think petition is the right answer. I think, for example, and again, I don't want to be partisan because it's not a Democratic or Republican thing, but, if Wolf loses, let's say, to someone like Scott Wagner, it's like having another Donald Trump, but in Pennsylvania. Okay,
I mean, he's on this list.
But he's just this ultra conservative who so elections matter. Even though Governor Wolf has not been perfect as far as the environment goes, it will be an absolute disaster for the environment in Pennsylvania if he loses. So you need to get out onto the streets. You need to figure out what officials are voting for the environment and what aren't. And you got to get out there and you got to make a difference. I mean, petitions are just so easily ignored. It's
but even with numbers, high numbers in the millions.
You gotta flip. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like a partisan. Because let me say this: there are legislators who are Republicans. For example, Kate Harper. She's Montgomery County. I know Kate very well. She's a good environmental legislator. I mean, I'm not going to knock her because she's Republican. She's a good environmental legislator, and there's others too. People like Tom Mert, a Republican, does a good job. And so I don't want to make this a Democratic or Republican thing.
It's not. It really isn't.
But there are certain political realities about who controls the calendar, what party controls the calendar, and what legislation comes to the forefront as a result of that. I think you got to elect bright, progressive people. I mean, we, in Philly, I'm seeing a higher quality of legislator in Philadelphia. People like, Brian Sims and Jared Solomon and Joanna McClintock and Bullock and people who are just brighter and more progressive and who are just aren't party hacks.
They get it.
We need more people in Harrisburg who are bright and progressive and care about the environment, and that could come on both sides of the aisle. But you got to figure out who those people are, and because it's hard. It's because we all say the same thing to our people, so it's hard for people to sift through. Okay, who's really have you heard anyone say they're against the environment? They don't. So you got to figure out, and you got to get to the polls, and you got to, step forward yourself if you're running against someone who's not doing their job. But it's you gotta be active, and I think, as I mentioned before, work in concert with these trusted environmental groups, and make them stronger and make them more effective.
How do we figure out which of the elected representatives in the state legislature would be the correct people to go to?
Right. Right. All of these environmental groups, Penn Future, Penn Environment, Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, Clean Air Council, Pennsylvania Environmental Council. Like, on every one of their websites, I made them all contributions.
Okay.
And I would suggest people do that. And then if they have these action alerts, I would get on that. And then you would look at these groups. They evaluate candidates. The PA Conservation Voters puts out an environmental scorecard, and they do that in combination with Sierra Club. So look at the environmental scorecard of your legislator and see if he's worthy of continuing to hold his job. And as you move forward and these action alerts come about, and let's say the severance tax bill in late January is if you get an action alert from Sierra Club, vote against House Bill 1409 because it contains damaging DEP permitting positions. Write that legislator saying, Representative, Donatucci or whoever, vote no on 1401. And then figure out what they did. Did they vote yes or no? And then
hold them accountable.
Your representative, I am very disappointed that you voted for, Representative 1401 because it contains some very damaging provisions to the DEP, to the DEP, and follow up. And you know what? If your legislature continues to do this, maybe he has a primary battle, and they're not, and if he's not voting the right way, then maybe you vote for his primary opponent if he seems better. So you got to sort of be engaged, but you got to be engaged in this process. And I think the easiest shorthand way for people who are a little bit overwhelmed by it all is to just take the lead of these groups, which I mentioned. Group. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
There's another one, Food and Water.
I'm sure they're out there, but they're not. I don't interact with them too much.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind entertaining questions.
Yeah.
Okay, please give it.
Yeah. So I'll give you my email address first. It's not hard to remember. It's Greg at gregvitali.com. GREGVITALI.com. Greg at gregvitali.com. So you can shoot me an email, or you can give the office a call, 610-789-3900, 610-789-3900. And we could tell you what the status of any bill is, or if you need find out who your legislator is or what their phone number is. We could get you that information. Or we could also give you the status of any bill, or give you the link so you can in the future look it up yourself, whatever you want. So yeah, my office can be a resource on all things relating to environmental protection. I'll tell you a quote. Did you see the Al Gore movie, the sequel, his second?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, but he had a good line near the end. He said we don't have a climate crisis, we have a democracy crisis.
I agree with you.
And I think that's part of it. And I read this other quote the other day. There's a great book called Dark Money, which I encourage people to read. But I think the quote was, you can have democracy and you can have wealth concentrated in very few hands, but you can't have both. And so I think the overarching thought here is the corrupting influence of money we have on our process. And I think in trying to solve the environmental problems, you have to solve these money problems too.
But people do need to be well informed of the issues, like you're saying, and find out where various legislators, you know, how they're voting.
People have to pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. We can't just elect people and say sayonara. Do you have anything that you would like to add, or any comments or things you would like the listeners to know outside of this very well-written Marcellus money and the Pennsylvania Legislature report? I was going to try to make a PDF and put it on my link page.
Oh, sure. That'd be great. Make sure you have the most recent version. Yeah.
And then also you have the checking the box on your website as well.
You just
I'll put your website.
Google my name and they can get to it really quickly.
I'll put your name as a link on my web my web link for this. So anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think just thank you again for allowing me to come into your excellent studios and say what I had to say. So thank you very much for all the great work you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.